Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening, live in Prince George, British Columbia. It's time! Introducing first, Fighting out of the red corner. This game is an abstract tile drafting game with pattern building and set collection. From designer Michael Kiesling, Azul. And introducing second, Fighting out of the blue corner. This game is an abstract dice rolling game with pattern building and set collection. From Adrian Adamscu and Daryl Andrews, Sagrada. Now, let's get ready to not get sued by Michael Buffer.
Azul or Sagrada? It's the age-old debate. Going back for, well, about 10 months. Which one is better? Actually, why the heck are we comparing these? I mean, sure, they're both games. They're colorful. Sagrada represents the windows of the Templo Expiatorio della Sagrada Familia. Azul resembles a box of Scotty's tissues.
Scotty's, the Canadian Kleenex.
Yes, I know. It represents the tiles of the Royal Palace of Evora. I am Portuguese. Admittedly, they are thematically similar. But mechanically, these games start to diverge. Both involve building a pattern on a private board from a limited selection of options, I'll grant you that, but Azul employs tiles while Sagrada dice. They draft their resources differently. In Azul, you score during a game, while Sagrada at the end. To me, comparing Sagrada to Azul is like comparing Star Wars to Star Trek. Yeah, you technically can, but it's kind of dumb. So, if I was to compare Sagrada to a game and see which one would come out on top, which would be the winner? It would have to be based on similar mechanics, obviously. So, what is the better game? Role player. Yeah, I know you saw that coming. It was in the title of the video.
Jarring, yes, but justified. Sagrada and Role Player feature near identical mechanics and, in my opinion, have more in common than the former does with Azul. Role Player represents an ingenious, out-of-the-box idea. What if you made the entire character creation process of a Dungeons & Dragons character the entire game? And yes, it's not generic fantasy role-playing, it's D&D. I'm calling it as it is. Can you tell I play? It's one of those concepts that game designers like myself kick themselves over. It was sitting right there in front of their eyes without being utilized. Both Sagrada and Role Player utilize a favored mechanic of mine, dice drafting. Sagrada is by far the easier of the two. That game features 10 rounds, matching the 5x4 lattice on each player's board. Each player selects a pattern to insert in said board, as well as a secret point objective. The current player draws twice the number of dice as players, rolls them, then selects one to place adhering to the rules of the board. Once each player has chosen, the last player selects another, and the whole thing runs in reverse back to the first player. Points are rewarded at the end based on randomized win conditions set at the beginning. There are also tokens that can be spent on specific abilities available to everybody. Role Player takes this rule set almost verbatim and builds upon them. Instead of stained glass windows, Role Player features character boards. On it lists the female or male variant of one of the many races available. There is no distinction between the two, though the male sides will, unfortunately, reveal the missteps in production quality Role Player has over Sagrada. The latter is damn near perfect, but with Role Player, take extra caution when punching the inserts from the board. The boards themselves are passable, but the designs are a little bland, missing out on the novel idea of making the boards resemble dated and weathered character sheets with eraser burns and coffee stains included. You can make the character illustrations intentionally bad and get away with it. Well, one can dream. Players remove a random color from the dice bag, offering them 2 choices on the matching class card. They then each gain a random backstory and alignment card. Players also remove a certain number of starting dice from the bag, roll them, and then place them on the board, careful to remember that, like Sagrada, the summation of values and the arrangement of colors determines victory points by game's end. When it begins, the first player draws a number of dice equal to the number of players plus 1, setting them in increasing order left to right across an equal number of initiative cards. Atop or below the initiative set is another equal number of market cards. The first player gets the first pick of dice. A low number also claims the lowest initiative, meaning said player is also the first to purchase during the market phase. A higher number can be more useful, though that does place one at the back of the initiative during the market phase. Those in the middle at least gain extra gold. You also earn extra gold for placing a gold die, generally the only one unable to score victory points by game's end. After all players have selected a die and the corresponding initiative card, following initiative order, players can either discard a market card and gain 2 gold, or spend gold to acquire a market card. These can be either permanent boosts, activatable powers, or methods to acquire more points by the end of the game. And this includes armor and weapon sets. Remaining dice and market cards are removed by round's end. Additionally, when a die is placed, a player can activate an attribute action based on the row where that die is placed. Strength flips 1 die to its opposite value. Dexterity swaps 2 die locations. Constitution allows a marginal increase or decrease to 1 die. Intelligence allows a reroll to a die already placed. Wisdom allows the cube on one's alignment board to shift. It can also shift based on certain market cards. And Charisma offers a single 1 gold discount for the market that same turn. You guessed it, just like in D&D, unless you're a paladin, Charisma is your dump stat. I'm not sure if that was intended, but the gold discount is by far the single weakest ability by far. And that's basically it. Once all dice have been placed, the game can be scored based on adherence to attribute goals, the alignment card, the backstory card, with additional points being earned from dice placed matching one's player color and any points from acquired market cards. Highest points determine the winner. Obviously, there's a lot more going on with roleplayer than with Sagrada, and this additional complexity is welcome, as there is considerably more a player can do on his or her turn to mitigate the randomness of dice rolls. One would think a game based around die placement would have issues with randomness, but during a game, there's a lot that can be done to affect the dice being claimed. Though the same can't be said with the start of the game. And that's weird. Sagrada is near perfect because of its simplicity. The added rules in roleplayer regrettably create some problems early in the game, which I won't get into just yet. As several months ago, at the time of this video's posting, roleplayer was followed up with an impressive but shockingly unnecessary expansion, Monsters and Minions, which offers new rules and mechanics while also not subtly addressing some, though not all, of the issues with the base game. Unlike many other expansions, which equate to game content removed pre-launch and sold later as DLC, the vilified practice seen in video games, Monsters and Minions does appear as an optional accessory, a garnish. And even though I'll state up front that I won't play without it, I must also admit that, somewhat ironically, that you're not missing out if you decide to give this one a pass. The first issue is with the game's very existence. Roleplayer, as said previously 945 words ago, is a perfect idea based on a single concept, making D&D character creation the entire game. Monsters and Minions takes that idea and adds combat. So in effect, we've gone in a circle and are playing D&D again. And bad D&D for that matter. There are entire games based on simple dungeon delving that employs a card deck rather than miniatures on dungeon tiles, and more elegantly than this expansion. Monsters and Minions is the C3PO of expansions. You'll see it everywhere, but it's honestly entirely unnecessary to the whole. What I'm getting at is, since I own Monsters and Minions, I'll use it, but if I want to play a deck-based dungeon delver, there are far better games available. One benefit the expansion does offer is rule changes meant to address issues with the original game. Rules you could and should employ for every game, regardless if you have the said expansion or not. All players start with the same 5 gold. Players have more class options, taking all classes, matching their color, and choosing 1 from 4 instead of 1 from 2. Initiative cards, and thus the number of dice removed each turn, increase by 1. These patches don't fix the remaining 2 problems with the game though, setup randomness and limited options with character creation, but they're steps in the right direction. Additionally, Monsters and Minions add scrolls, which are immediate effects, and boost dice, which range from 3 to 8 instead of 1 to 6. Among the new mechanics, these are the best of the bunch, and if you were on the fence to get this expansion, this would surely swing you to a buy. Oh, and they finally supplied a first player marker that, oddly enough, resembles a half-buried Sauron. The new expansion also offers a strange and familiar hero tomb that allows players to write down their characters. This is a nice touch, though a worthless one unless an expansion later plans to add a full role-playing game, which would be an ironic and utterly pointless affair. You can't employ these as actual characters. On their stats alone, they'd be far too powerful. But it brings us finally to the monsters, the brunt of the expansion, adding in minions, monsters, experience cubes, adventure tokens, as well as honor and injury tokens and combat dice. Based on player count and color, a monster is revealed. Next to it, 3 random face-down adventure cards are placed: location, obstacle, and attack. The monster is not actually an opponent you fight in any real sense, only a point spread, along with a single rule meant to alter the final round of the game. The adventure cards feature secret rules that allow players to add additional combat dice for this final round. The minion deck is shuffled and the top card revealed. Instead of sacrificing or buying a market card, a player can attempt to defeat a minion, which involves generating a value based on a number of combat dice you receive via conditions on the minion card, along with experience points and or gold spent. 2 lower roll, and the players suffer a wound token that reduces the final roll against the monster at the end of the game. High enough, and the player may gain honor, which adds to the final roll and or a trophy, allowing the player to claim the minion and take a glance at the uppermost adventure location they have not yet seen, allowing said player to work towards the end goal of fighting the monster. Experience is awarded regardless, more so on a victory. These can be spent for rerolls, adding additional combat dice, or the removing of wound tokens. Minions themselves don't award victory points, only the means to either gain gold or assist in the final fight. As such, they're just a means to hopefully gain at most 8 points. That is a whole lot of game for amounts to 20% of a player's total points. And that's not the only issue regarding minions. Given their requirements to defeat are based on arbitrary values on each card, especially in lower player count games, a minion can sit atop its deck for several rounds before anyone tries to defeat it. On more than one occasion, a minion did not get dealt with for nearly half the game. To deal with the minion also prevents you from gaining market cards, which may be a more reliable way to earn points. Not that they're that much better. Monsters and Minions adds more market cards, but none of them are armor, and with the removal of up to 36 cards in a 2-player game, good luck getting a matching set to score extra points. The expansion also adds more of everything else, more alignment cards, more backstory cards, but then doesn't amend the rule that forces only one option on each player. They get to choose a race and a class, but are stuck with whichever alignment and backstory is handed to them. At the very least, one could embrace the boost dice, the new initiative cards, the newer character cards, and the new rules. I'm not against Monsters and Minions. I just felt its implementation wholly unnecessary and somewhat against the theme of the original game. There are cosmetic wings on cars. We want them. They look pretty. But they don't offer anything to a vehicle's performance. One would assume Roleplayer would create a situation where someone can win by focusing only on market cards, while another player focuses on minions. Most games with such complexity offer multiple avenues of victory, with the loser unable to focus strategy while attempting to claim every reward. With Monsters and Minions, you really can win in every category and rocket away with a victory. All that Roleplayer really needed was an errata to fix certain issues, of which its expansion only partially addressed. An okay expansion at best. The oddest feature of Roleplayer and its expansion come in the form of variant rules located at the back of each of their respective rulebooks, the majority of which make the game better. The number of dice drafted was too low. The expansion increased them. There were not enough class options. The expansion increased those as well. However, the original and the expansion still suffer from a setup that could swing the game in one player's favor. The original Roleplayer offered a less random setup. Each player receives 1 die of each color rather than drawing randomly from the die bag. Then, if playing with 3 players, give each player a gold die in addition to this set of 6. Or if playing with 4 players, 2 gold die. All players roll their dice and place them on their character sheets in the standard game. This is a step in the right direction, but it should go further. Veteran gamers will recognize these standard roleplayer rules as inspired by the original Red Box Dungeons & Dragons basic set, a procedure later games seldom used. Surprisingly, Roleplayer didn't employ the rules taken directly from the pages of the game they are paying fan service to. And that's the modern 5th edition rules of D&D. So let's take a look at that original game. Oop, sorry, wrong game. Why would someone put that there? I wonder. In the current edition D&D, I had a spiral bound. That's what gamers do. In the current edition of D&D, the standard rule employs rolling 4 dice and dropping the lowest value. Alternates include setting the values based on a pool of points all players gain. Both versions can work to balance the setup of role player. Such an obvious solution, I'm honestly shocked they didn't think of it. Option 1. Remove 2 additional dice along with your random starting assortment. Roll them all, then remove the 2 you don't want. Option 2. This one modifies the variant found in role player. Remove 1 of each player color and set their values sequentially. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can set any die to any value. Additionally, you can remove a value from one die to increase another. Place them where you like. Additionally, as part of the setup, players are given 2 backstory and alignment cards at random to select one from instead of just being handed one. Well, that's an easy fix. Charisma. The charisma attribute action is far too weak. I'd consider increasing the rebate to 2 gold. Either that or the -1 discount does not vanish at the end of a turn. Monsters. Hiding the adventure cards is somewhat annoying, and it conceals many of the conditions to defeat the boss until, in some situations, it becomes too late to alter one's strategy. An alternative, once again endorsed in the main book, involves keeping all the adventure cards open. However, I would also make it necessary to defeat minions with trophies in order to claim one of the LOA tokens. You cannot earn combat dice from an adventure card unless you have the appropriate token, and when you kill a minion, you claim any token in any order. As for co-op rules, well, play D&D. The original role player has become one of my current favorite games, more so than Sagrada, which is depressing given how much fun the latter game was. Sagrada is more of a gateway game, and when indoctrinating new players, I will start with that one first. But when playing with experienced friends, Sagrada no longer makes an appearance. Azul, however, still has traction. The Monsters and Minions expansion, offering valuable and nearby mandatory additional rules, also saddles the game with garnish you could stand to ignore. Role player is the juicy porterhouse. Monsters and Minions is crispy salt and vinegar potatoes, along with a fistful of parsley. Great, now I'm hungry. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina.
Sagrada represents the windows of the Templo Expiatorio de la Sagrada Familia, where Azul resembles a... Oh, damn it, I had that line done perfectly well. I had it. I mean, Sagrada represents the windows of the Templo Expiatorio de la Sagrada Familia, where Azul Azul resembles. I can't say Azul resembles. Sagrada represents.